All right, welcome back into Content is for Closers, where each episode we talk with entrepreneurs, marketers, business owners about how they use content to make more money in their business. Carlton, what do you think of that mix? I think I went with entrepreneurs first this time instead of
Yeah, no, that
marketers.
was good. Except for I'm a little thrown off every time grammatically. I'm sure you know better because you're better at writing, but you say welcome into, not
Instead of
welcome
on
to.
to,
Yeah, or welcome to.
welcome to Content is for Closers.
That
Yeah,
that kind of that makes my brain glitch every time.
yeah. Well, you're sort of a cold designer type, and
It's
so
true.
you don't welcome people into your
Yeah,
digital space.
I'm
I'm trying
just
to
a
welcome
jerk.
them into this abode, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's just different opinions. Yeah. Enter in coldly here to this show. Thank you all for for joining us. I am your host Adam Vasquez, alongside the Snark Master himself, Carlton Riffle. Carlton, what's going on? What do you have for us?
I'm sure everyone's favorite part of the show is this icebreaker lame game of the week.
We
Um,
need to, so everybody knows, we've recorded like a bunch of these before the show got released. So if we get like a lot of bad feedback, we'll eventually pull this out, but you have to put up with it a few more times.
yeah. Until we get actual feedback on how
Yeah.
bad this is. Trying to get people to know you better, Adam. If you're not a completely cold, heartless person, then tell us what you are by telling us your Myers-Briggs personality type.
Okay, this is why you were asking me this. So originally you said, what is your Enneagram? And then you said, actually, let's do Myers-Briggs. And I said, well, the good news is it doesn't matter because I am whatever profile believes these things are absolute. I couldn't believe in something less than these these
Uh,
profiles. So you could tell me I'm an Enneagram 15. I think there's only 12. I would believe you. I'm a Myers-Briggs, 7 or blue or whatever the profile is that says this is a bunch of BS. What about you?
so I kind of think that we should have people just judge you based on that response and then
Okay.
send in what they think you are, and then we'll force you to take it, and whoever is right, the first person that responds that's right gets like $100 from your wallet.
Wow. Okay. Very strong gift. Yeah, go ahead. Try to diagnose me.
Yeah, and I think
Whoever,
that would be
whoever.
good. So I actually was more of a believer in it, and then I listened to a podcast that covered the start of it, and apparently Myers Briggs specifically is missing some credentials around its authority. So,
Shocked.
anyways, I'm an ENTP for those of you that like this type of thing. Kind of
That's
know.
Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, that's Myers Briggs.
Okay.
But I do think that I'm a little bit of an ambivert when it comes to whether or not I'm an extrovert or an introvert. So I kind of switch based on my context.
That's good. You're able to do both. I think that probably I should have asked this to our guest today, Kenneth Burke. Didn't know we were going to do this obviously when I talked to him, but I'm sure those are actually helpful tools. I just have not had many great experiences with them myself. But especially if you're trying to build out a team, build out a culture, put pieces together so that they can perform well together, I'm sure some of that would come in handy. And that's essentially what Kenneth does and what we talked to him about today. So
Just give a quick overview of what was covered. We talked a little bit about communication and kind of figuring out your style, communication style, and differentiating the business and messaging by talking to your customers. And then also, he kind of finished things up with talking about encouraging your team to be excited about what they're doing and passionate, developing this flywheel of excitement and passion around what it is your team is doing.
Kenneth Burke is the Vice President of Marketing for TextRequest, which is a business messaging platform that was named the TechX Company of the Year in 2020. In addition to leading marketing for TextRequest, Kenneth is a board member for the Chattanooga Chamber of Commerce, where he helps engage and recruit new companies to the city. During our conversation, we discussed the importance of a marketing culture to building a fast-growing startup like TextRequest, and specifically how Kenneth has cultivated a spirit of innovation and creativity within his team. Kenneth and his team have won several awards and are constantly pushing the envelope when it comes to new forms of marketing and driving brand awareness, which is why I think he'll provide a ton of value in this episode. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope you will too. Let's dive into the episode with Kenneth Burke of TextRequest. All right, so before we get too deep into marketing and culture and all these things, I have to ask you, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, doing some research, and saw that you were part of a disc golf club when you were in college. And I've recently
Yeah.
taken up disc golf in the last year, in the pandemic. I'm very bad, but like I need to know what's going on with this club. Are you are you semi-pro? What's happening? Are you on a tour?
No. I mean, you know how college guys are, right? We wanted to do something fun and have an excuse to do it. And so there's me and another friend. We like throwing disc into cages, and we said, hey, there's not a club for this on campus, so why don't we just go create one? And then
Oh,
we did,
cool.
and it was fun.
Maybe next time we're in person, you can give me a few tips. But cool. Well, disc golf aside, we're here really to talk more about marketing and the work you've done with text requests and through your career. But maybe for those who are unaware, uninitiated, could you describe what text request is and what you do there?
Yeah, so Text Request is a business text messaging platform built to help you ignite your customer engagement. And so really what we've done is crafted these plug and play messaging solutions so that you can connect with your customers whenever you want, wherever you work, especially now that, everyone's remote and having to collaborate virtually. And then we give you as a business or an organization a professional way to manage all that. So it's a software as a service, and we just make texting and actually getting responses very easy.
Cool.
And then my role as VP of marketing is basically just to create and capture demand for text requests. I started a little under 2 months after the company launched, and I was cold calling for sales, right? And just kind of got tired of that and wanted to do something else. And we were a self-funded or bootstrap startup, and no one was doing marketing really. And I said, hey, that sounds interesting. Let me do that. 6.5 years later, here we are.
Awesome. Okay, I didn't know that. That's actually perfect. This show is called Content is for Closers, and the genesis of it was my very first job was also cold calling in sales, and it was horrible. It was a terrible experience.
Yeah.
and so
that seems to be par for the course.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not right. It shouldn't be that way. There are so many ways to generate sales and revenue that, don't have to be terrible. And that's really what the heart of this show is trying to walk through some of the practical steps of how to do that. So right now we've been walking through kind of a framework of how do you come up with your value proposition, your script, your sales script, so to speak. How do you train your team? Because all the sales trainings I went through were terrible. All of these things, right? And what I really wanted to talk to you about was around the idea of cultivating a culture that creates continuously, right? Mm-hmm. Like with cold calls, like with selling, you're only as good as your last call. You're only as good as your last sale, or in the content space, in the last piece of creative that you've developed that really resonated or really hit. And so last week we had Mickey Cloud on from the Sasha Group, and he talked a little bit about how to create those assets that resonate with your audience and have impact. But today we wanted to hear from you just about establishing that culture then that isn't just a one-hit wonder, but really empowers the team to create on a continual basis. So I guess as a marketing leader at a startup, how do you think about stating your value proposition and making that something clear the team can understand and communicate effectively?
The path has basically been, build something, talk to customers, get their feedback on it, iterate, and keep that going. And so creating something new and always having to change and improve is kind of baked into the business model a little bit, which then tends to flow through everything else, right? So if we're trying to improve the product, talk to customers, we're always trying to content and create something that's going to be more helpful, that's going to resonate more, that's going to lead to more conversions or play a bigger supporting role in that sales cycle. On our team in particular, we've been really intentional on that feedback loop to make sure that each person is able to get and give feedback and that it's constructive. Does that help us stand out in the market? So does that give us a unique position, or is it, the same thing a lot of other people are saying? So for instance, we were one of the first players in business text messaging, but it wasn't too long before there were a decent number of players in the space. A lot of people went with something to the effect of join the conversation. A phrase we've been using around here lately is it's hard to over communicate. And so it's just reiterating that to our team internally over and over again, and then to our customers and in all of our sales and marketing and other messaging.
So I want to go back to the first part. You talked about getting something built, getting a feedback loop started and being able to iterate based on that. How does that work within marketing? Because I think it can be difficult sometimes. First of all, it's very arbitrary, right? Like messaging and design, all these things are somewhat subjective. Any practical tips on just how to take feedback or how to give feedback in a way that moves the conversation forward as opposed to just staying in that cycle?
You have to start with the concept that mistakes are okay. It's us working together to reach a goal that we've agreed that we both want to hit, right? And so something I say a lot, especially whenever we have new employees on, is I don't care if you make a mistake. You're going to have 14 million opportunities to get this thing right. It's okay if you mess up 5 or 10 times. We can work through that. And especially when you're talking about content, I mean, the mistakes are not costly unless you are totally just ignoring every tenet of business and not paying attention to your customers or anything like that. I mean,
So you don't advise doing that, I guess.
Yeah, no, not normally.
For the most part.
Here's an example. We work with over 100 different industries, and so we often create content or like a blog post or an ebook for a particular industry.
Sure.
Particularly people in different departments. So, partnerships or, business development or support or dev. I mean, we've got that feedback loop internally in marketing, but then it's something that also just spreads throughout the company. And so it's not like anyone gets singled out, or it's not like, oh, well, that's the only person who's critiquing things this much.
What about when it comes to, for instance, you talked about the messaging, right? And differentiating yourself from some of the other things that are being said in and around the space. What is the process that you use to say, this is what we're trying to say, this is the message we are holding is important, and we need to find a creative way, a different way of saying that?
So first was laying out what is actually our story, or our brand story, right? So what's the problem that's going on in the market that's creating conflict that led to why we exist or why we are doing what we're doing today? How do we solve that problem? And then how do we do that uniquely? And do we do that uniquely? Honestly, is a question a lot of companies have to grapple with, because if you're using adjectives or descriptors like highest or most or best, you're not actually talking about your value. You're trying to play a subjective game.
The point about superlatives, using the best, we're the biggest, the baddest, the best, whatever, you're not really addressing the customer problem. The odds of them caring if you're actually the kindest or the fastest response or whatever are low. The odds of them having a problem, caring deeply about that problem, and knowing that you care about that problem are very high. Like, that's essentially what they're looking for when they're going through that shopping process. So exactly what you're saying, of recentering around the customer problem as opposed to whose idea is the best or marketing ploy can we use. How do you as a leader empower, whether it be your team or other members across other teams, to talk about that effectively?
There's two things that stand out initially. One is that we still use our other teams to inform what we do. And so, if everything we do is based on customer conversations, well, who's having the most customer conversations? It's not the marketing team, it's sales, success, and support. So we go in and we talk to them and, understand the problems, the nuances and the challenges and the stuff that's going really well. And so, bring that into the fold. And then because they were able to be a part of that process, they're invested, so to speak, or they care about it. They feel like they're a part of it, and they actually want to listen to us. I mean, that's just basic people skills, I guess. But then it's something, they get to share their ideas as well. And so part two, which is right in line with it, is just creating things that your team wants to share. The chamber example, someone will send something to me and say, hey, will you help us spread the word on this? And I will spread the word on that because I am really passionate about the mission that they're promoting. When it comes to me, it's hiring, and it's about, promoting Chattanooga as one of, if not the best places to live in America. And I'm all for that, and so I'll talk about that all day. To flip it around for our own company, we have to look at how can we cultivate that same kind of passion and excitement around what we're doing. And some things that have worked for us, winning awards always helps. So we've won a bunch of awards: Best Place to Work, Tech Company of the Year, Fastest Growing Company, a bunch of things like that.
Yeah.
And those are all great things that just get people excited. And in our case too, for marketing, since a lot of times marketing is so intangible and hard to put a finger on exactly what's happening, they have something that they can see, hey, this is what marketing is doing, or marketing is doing things that lead to recognitions like this that get us all excited and also help us bring in more business.
It's almost like that's your initial customer, are those internal people you're talking to. Like when you gave going back to the chamber example, that matters to you because the story they're telling is important to you. If you can establish a culture where you're speaking into stories, you're sharing stories that matter to your team, inherently that's going to incentivize them to share it, to be a part of that conversation. Are there any processes or formal check-ins or anything like that you have with the rest of the teams to get some of that feedback and have those conversations, or do you guys just do it over time?
It's a lot of scheduled meetings, but it's not like meetings for the sake of meetings. It's, hey, we're going to talk about this particular topic. we're all busy, so we're just going to book a time and then talk about it. And because we're having these conversations so often, I mean, even just our marketing team, but because we're having these conversations, questions come up we need answers to. And so we pull in the appropriate person to help us with that. We're working on playbooks for a certain industry, and we get to a point, there's a nuance here we're not exactly sure about. Let me bring in, I don't know, someone for business development and talk about that.
Cool. That's very helpful. We love getting into like the practical. How are you talking about it? What are you saying? What is the timing of it? So even setting meetings, people are allergic to meetings these days. I get it, but that's when you want to have a meeting, when you have an intentional outcome that you're looking for something like that. So it's super helpful. Any just marketing wins that you just want to share or speak to as a result of kind of this culture you all have set up?
We primarily have an inbound sales funnel. So our team's created enough content, positioned ourselves well enough in search engines that people are coming to us, and that speaks volumes, right? Because we're in an increasingly competitive market, so it's harder and harder to make those people come in. So that's great. That's one piece I'm really proud of. I think two is creating things that people end up wanting to share. Passions are developed, they're not found. And so I hear a lot of people ask, well, how do I get my team excited about this? Or how do I get my customers excited about this? And no one was born excited about text messaging software, right? Like that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So that had to be developed somehow. So how was it developed? Well, okay, we had a bunch of people who were really excited about how we could help businesses better connect with their customers. Text messaging happens to be the vehicle that works best to do that these days. But we were pumped about that, and then so we worked with some customers to see results and got the customers excited about it, and that fed into getting other employees excited about it, and then we just created this flywheel that keeps spinning. So that's something I do recommend to others whenever it comes up in conversation. How do I get people on my team to share content? Well, help them build that passion, that care for what it is you're doing, and that's also going to flow into everything else that happens. I mean, people are going to be more productive. They're going to feel happier and healthier in the workplace, especially in sales and service. They'll do their jobs better, and that will also lead to the revenue goals you want. But it starts with working with people as individuals.
Yeah. And that's where Text Request, obviously not just to tout your horn, but that's where they're very fortunate to have someone like you who has been there since the beginning and knows those cultural stories, knows those threads to pull on, knows the success stories that have happened, and can speak to them both historically as well as like what's going on right now. Because I think that in our very first episode, we talked about hiring a journalist to actually be part of your marketing team. And one of the problems that people run into when they try to do that is money is not their primary necessarily motivator, right? It's like being a part of something bigger. It's telling an actual compelling story. And a lot of companies just miss that. They forget that as marketers, we're storytellers, and our customers need us to tell those stories effectively, but our internal team also needs that. So one way that you've done that, just to sort of wrap up here, is you have a podcast of your own. Maybe just tell us a little bit about it and how can people follow along?
Yeah. So for our podcast, it's called Build Your Queue. It's around creating, more opportunities, creating more customer engagement to bring more people into you, have that sales funnel queued up, so to speak. So that's where you can find that. If you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. Just look me up, Kenneth Burke. And then if you want to see, learn more about Text Request, of course, you can reach out to me. I'm also on Twitter at Kenneth Burke 423. Of course, you can reach out to me. You can also just go to textrequest.com and grab a demo or reach out.
Very cool. And we'll link all of those things, the show, Build Your Queue, QUEU, right? Or like the weird way, the European.
Yeah, the full way.
Yes, yeah. The correct way. We'll link that, Kenneth's LinkedIn and his Twitter, as well as the site below. But appreciate you coming on and sharing some of these lessons with us, Kenneth. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right. Thanks again to Kenneth for joining the show. Really appreciate him taking the time to share some of those lessons with us. Carlton, after just listening to it, what was maybe one of the takeaways or lessons you learned from it?
Really narrowing it down, I'd say finding a way to differentiate was a good point. A lot of people end up saying the same thing when they're marketing. Maybe you find out in your industry, there's a common thread that everyone hits on. So sometimes just by changing what you're saying and how you're saying it can give you new customers and can make you stand out when there's a sea of sameness. That was kind of one interesting thing. And then I think specifically with content marketing, content trends can pop up after a little bit. And even in specific industries, there becomes trends around what's popular to cover and how you cover it, and even the style of video or the style of audio. So finding ways to differentiate within that as well, your actual content that you're creating is another good way to think about it.
I thought his approach to investigating internally and not just motivating, but kind of equipping the internal team to be able to be a part of the content process and getting their buy in was just noteworthy. It's something that, especially as marketers, we tend to overlook sometimes. This is our job. This is what we're supposed to do. So this is what the piece is going to be. And getting that buy-in from all the internal stakeholders is sometimes more important than even it relating to the external stakeholders, just because they're going to push it harder and help you get more bang out of it. Before we bounce this week, Carlton, this again, have another segment that people more than likely hate, but we have to
except for the people who get featured, just
except for
to
the
our
free
enormous
ads,
audience.
the free ads that we just hand out willy nilly. And that is our Have You Heard segment. Carlton, what do you have for the people?
One of my favorite apps on my computer, it has to be the Affinity Suite. A lot of people in my field use the Creative Cloud Suite, which I enjoy too. There's some cool things about it. Something that's a little bit more simplified is the Affinity Suite. It basically is 3 apps. So they have a publisher, which is similar to InDesign. They have a designer, Affinity Designer, which is similar to Illustrator. And then they have Affinity Photo, which is like Photoshop. And so feature for feature, they're missing a few things, but really have covered all of your main basic operations and do it in a way that's super clean and well designed. They've won several Apple awards. So highly recommend the Affinity Suite. They have this cool thing where when you open Publisher, it opens all 3 apps internally, inside that one app.
Cool.
So you can seamlessly switch between the 3 and, kind of handle anything photo related and then jump back over to vector stuff. So I enjoy that.
Is that mainly what you use for our stuff?
Yeah, I actually do. To me, it's faster. It's less bloated than
Yeah.
the Creative Suite, and it has some nice options for mixing bitmap and vector graphics that are pretty
Cool.
useful.
My Have You Heard is, so the idea behind this segment is really that we're trying to give you something that you haven't heard of that you might be able to use to close more business or make your content, be leveraged more effectively, etc. And I just saw a tactic really this week that I just really enjoyed. It got my attention, and it was really well done. So there's a company called Micro Acquire. It's a software platform, and the CEO's name is a guy named Andrew Gazdecki. They're Silicon Valley, like they're in that world. They're not, I don't think they're like funded that way, but they're kind of like a software in that world. And they're always making fun of the Silicon Valley tech world. So to announce a new partnership, they got a big partner that is going to help their clients get access to funding. Essentially, they hired on the app called Cameo. And if you're not familiar with Cameo, it's basically where you can get famous people like Carlton to like wish you happy birthday or whatever.
I was going to ask if you were on Cameo, if we could pay like $2 to have you go give somebody
But like truly famous people are on this thing, and like you can get them to say something and you pay them $150 or whatever. And so what Andrew Gazdecki did was he went to the character's name is Russ Hanneman from Silicon Valley. If you've heard of Silicon Valley, I'm sure, the show.
Yeah.
So there's like a sketch comedy, kind of like The Office, but about Silicon Valley. I think it was on HBO. And one of the most ridiculous characters is this guy named Russ Hanneman, who's this crazy investor. And long story short, he got him to make the announcement video about this partnership. And so it was just really funny and creative because Micro Acquire's whole thing is like, don't be dumb, don't be Silicon Valley, don't like raise a bunch of money you don't need. And then they got the most notorious, outrageous investor from the show to play that character and give them a shout out on social. So I just thought it got my attention immediately, and it was funny. It was really well done. And I was just thinking, like, if you're a small business, if you're a business of any kind, $150 and you get access to these people with these followings and reputations, it's something you should look into, I feel like.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So do you know, do they have terms or what?
So they send you
the
a video file, like it's yours now, but some people charge differently if it's for personal use or for commercial use. And that's pretty clear when you go into the app, how much you have to pay for either. But still, let's just say it was $500. The earned media that this particular one got is crazy for $500, versus a paid ad spend. So yeah, something to look into. Well, thank you all for listening. Truly, thank you for listening. This has been kind of a labor of love early on here. We're figuring out our way. We are through 6 episodes now, and we don't plan on stopping. We've got like 20 more recorded. So just stick with us. If you are enjoying the show in any way, we would love it if you share it with one other person who you think could benefit. That's how we grow. Other than that, we'll see you next week.